So I want to talk today about what I think our business leaders should know, and how really experience, research, and design, the things that we do, are a real game changer for the business. And I don't say this without some background to that. So some of you know I had over 25 years working in different organizations. I worked in Siemens, where Tobias was before he was. I was in a computer company before that, that actually bought a company that Jared worked at earlier. So I see little connections everywhere. I was at Novartis in Basel. I was at Pfizer in New York City, as Julie knows. And I was at a Dutch chemical and coatings, and at that time, human and animal health company, AkzoNobel, fascinating business in the Netherlands. And my role was kind of dual. It was talent, so it was the employee life cycle, if you will, and it was a new role. I was really lucky because I got to be part of really kind of setting the strategy and the tone for how these things did, sometimes to the detriment of all the employees because we didn't have human-centered design in the way we did it. Um, and I was also had a transformation role. And the thing that I noticed in business transformation and working in these different companies is that we didn't spend nearly enough time listening to the people who were using our solutions. We always used a waterfall top-down approach. And when I went out on my own about 14 years ago in the New York City area, one of the things that appealed to me about human-centered design is this idea of you spend time in the world of the people who are using your solutions. You get to understand their context, the problems they're trying to solve. Um, and that for me was a real game changer. And I honestly feel, and I early in my career, I was in marketing research for Hilton Hotels in the resorts division. I was a young graduate student, and I did market research. I used to go out to the properties and see how people were using the golf, using the family centers, using the restaurants and some of the entertainment venues. So in a way, I feel like this is coming back to the roots of that, which is spending time in the world of the people that we're designing for. And that's why I love this and why I really enjoy meeting all of you who are doing this for your businesses. At one point, this was in New York about 2014, I believe. I was talking to a French you'll appreciate this, Benoit. I can't remember the name of the company, unfortunately, but it was a French spirits company. And the CEO was asking, how do we outgrow the competition? We're growing at a healthy rate. This was mid 2010s. So the stock market was doing well. But how do we outgrow that? And the answer that I came up with at the moment was you have to discover what you do best that's better than the competition. And I'm kind of a wannabe runner. I'd like to run a few miles and bike. And those of you who do sports or practically anything, if you want to compete, you can't say, well, I want to copy what other runners do or other cyclists do. You've got to figure out what works best for you and how your body, how your mind, how your system works in a way that can, if you want to win a race, what can you do best with what you've got that's better than the competition? So that's how we can win in the marketplace. So that notion really kind of became kind of almost a point of of quest for me, where I wanted to find a way to do that. And then in that next year, I came upon some people who were practicing human-centered design, and that's how this whole journey started for me. So on the opposite side of that, what breeds sameness? What keeps us from breaking out and being unique and being able to win? A couple things that I've noticed along the way that I used to do in my business. We used to benchmark a lot. We would do engagement surveys partly because we wanted to do what? Compare against all the companies in our competitive set and make the CEO and the leadership team feel good or not good about the results. Downside of that is, and you've probably seen this in your organization, is when we were having a bad year, sometimes we would say, oh, we don't want to ask anybody about input because we know the answer is going to be bad, which is kind of defeats the purpose of doing a survey, right? So Just a quick check. Julie, we are recording, right? Good. Okay. So conforming to others' ideas of good is not what we want to do. We want to find out what we do best so that look focusing inside. I think that it helps also um, to breed sameness when we hire people from other companies to design our solutions. And we say, well, we admire what company X is doing over there, or maybe they're our main competitor. So we're going to have them come in and design for us, which just makes us do more of the same that that other company is doing. So it doesn't refresh or bring any fresh thinking in. Also, promoting people in the organization who have all the answers instead of all the questions. I remember a few years ago when I was coaching um, a, group of scientists at a food science organization in Parma, Italy. Fabulous place. One of the people who led the GMO team was really searching to understand how he could lead this leadership team. And those of you who've been in highly technical or scientific organizations, you know how hard it is, the stress that's on people to feel like they have to have all the answers. And in that coaching session, one of the light bulb moments for this person was, I don't need to have all the answers. I need to have all the questions. That takes the burden off of leaders. So, but we don't often do that. So that helps us. Not doing that keeps us from breaking out. And so let's look at how we build uniqueness, or as we would say, competitive advantage. I would say one of the first thing is we have to know our customers, and we need to know what things are critical for them to solve. We have to understand their world and the things that they're trying to attain in that world. We need to know our colleagues and the things that help enable their best performance, their commitment, their engagement, their feeling like they would uh, they would recommend our place of work. They would want to do anything for us. It's really is the heart of performance and productivity and happiness at work. We need to also work more across all of the people who touch a particular journey to make sure that we see and we work on the same priorities of the end users that we're trying to solve for, we're trying to help. So, and I would add to that, we also need to build some new capabilities and ways of thinking. And this is really core. This is kind of the glue for the things above, that it's not enough just for us who are concerned with these things to do them. We have to create a movement in the organizations around us so that we can expand that. Let's kind of go a little bit deeper into each one of these things. So customer research, what are some things that helps us to do or to answer? Do we know who our customers are? A lot of organizations, a lot of teams, product teams, solutions teams, don't take enough time to understand who it is they're designing for. Do we know which of our products that they use and how they use them? That's another key insight that we often don't take the time to understand. And have we actually seen them using our products? That is even more enlightening to be able to see firsthand the context that they're in and to see kind of how this all fits in. I remember a few years ago, I was working with the product team at SC Johnson. SC Johnson is a global consumer products company, and I was working with this product team. So you had the people that designed the solution that went in the bottle. You had the people who designed the delivery mechanism. You had people that were responsible for compliance and safety. You had people that were doing marketing for this. They would go as an intact team. I remember them telling me the story of how they'd gone recently to Spain and Portugal to observe customers in their homes or apartments using their products. And that just completely changed their perspective, because then they saw, well, how many people are in that home? Are there children? Are there elderly people? Are they by themselves? What kind of surfaces are they trying to clean or address? What else is going on around the time that they're using their products? The context is so incredibly rich, and being able to help a design team understand how to design better. So along with that, do we know the problems that they're trying to solve? Do we understand their moments that matter, the things that change their perspective, their commitment, how they feel about you, and which interactions among those have the highest importance? Um, I remember working with an internet team at Allianz in Germany a few years ago, and we had a very, I would say, reluctant senior product owner coming to our co-creation, our mapping co-creation meeting, where we invited some end users to map the experience of using the company intranet. And he did not want to come to this meeting. And eventually we were successful in getting him there. And after listening to this session for a half a day and listening to these user experiences and seeing them use their products, we did set up some stations for them to use it. This person said this remark here. Now I know how it feels to use my products. Now I know how it feels to use my products. So getting into empathy and this light bulb moment. And I love that comment. It's something that has really helped guide me in my purpose in doing all this work. So similarly, what are some things that colleague research helps us to answer? Do we know who our colleagues are? Do we know something about them? Do we know something about the different types of needs, preferences, use patterns that they have or solutions? Do we know how they use the things that we've designed for them? I remember when I was at AkzoNobel, we rolled out a performance management process, a new one, first time ever done global, for 65,000 employees in 100 countries. We did this in 3 months. So it was very fast. And we had someone in one of our business units who kept sending me messages saying, hey, have you checked how this works when we're doing mid-year feedback? Have you checked how this works when we're setting goals? They were several weeks ahead of us in the process, testing out the system that we had implemented and giving us some problems that were not working. So this for me was a really important moment to understand how this worked. An example of how I wasn't using human-centered design at the time. So do we know what problems that our end users, our colleagues, need to solve? And like similarly to customers, do we know which points of interaction have the highest importance for them? And do we understand how they support the key customer interactions? All of this helps us to build what I like to call organizational empathy. And studies have shown that when we listen to people, when we map their experience, you hear sometimes marriage and family therapists or sociologists talk about mapping, the impact that has on people in feeling belonging and connectivity. So if we want to impact engagement, doing these activities does that very thing. And I love the fact that it helps us to develop empathy. So the third thing that I mentioned was working in product teams. So let's talk about some advantages or benefits or business cases for that. When we work in these multidisciplinary, cross-functional teams, and do this sort of research and listening, it helps us to see the same problems at the same time in the same way. And that's so, so valuable. I'll try to build the case for this as I go through with some of these use cases in a moment. But one of the goals that we have here is to prioritize out of all of this insights, use that information to prioritize where should we be focusing on in our business. And I think if there's one thing you want to that we could communicate to business leaders that would help them understand the business case for what we do, it's that we can help them have clarity through these insights to prioritize where should we be spending our time and money. And at this time of year, that's one of the biggest things, that may be the main thing that most of our organizations are thinking about. Where should we be spending our time and putting our resources? And it also helps us understand when we work in these cross-functional teams to see the problem from different angles. I remember in Novartis working with research and development that having these research or development teams with their different functions working together, it helped them see the problem from different angles. So if you'd come up with a solution, but you hadn't thought about the delivery or the safety or the packaging or the marketing, you would need to redesign your project differently. Why not start with that team together so that you can address those problems at the same time? And as Birgit was saying yesterday, so eloquently, we need to see journeys as a connected value chain with all the component parts. Um, and we want to focus on the needs of the end users versus our goals. We were talking about in one of the presentations yesterday that we want to deliver a solution for our end user, not our organization chart with the way we think and operate in our teams. And again, there's an organizational empathy component of all of this. Being able to focus on these stories from a user perspective is so, so important. So let's talk about, before I give some use cases, how to build some new capabilities and mindset and create that movement that we were talking about. First of all, we're trying to encourage organizations, and I've been writing about this and talking to leadership teams about hiring people like all of you here in this audience who have this experience and expertise doing field research and testing, who can identify the insights that we're talking about that will lead to prioritization and knowing where to focus. And then we need to get these people in the functions where this work will be done. So if you have these people already in your organization working on some, let's say, digital solutions or more of a UX focus, move them to other parts where you can have them work on a customer experience or a people experience team and influence and bring your thinking and way of working into these other areas. So move them where they can influence. And then find a willing sponsor to start. You've probably heard this theme pretty consistently over the last couple of days. Start small, find somebody who's willing to sponsor your work and start there rather than trying to go big and boil the ocean. And you want to create a movement. So at a certain point, you're not going to be able to move very far unless you build a skill set and a mindset in other people in the business outside of these specialty areas of UX, CX, and PX and service design. You've got to get other people to learn these skills, human-centered design skills. So you want to teach them. Get your stakeholders into a class or boot camp. Get your product team members. And develop some human-centered design coaches. I think that it's an excellent idea, and we're seeing this in some organizations where this becomes a learning focus for the organization. My last role was as head of learning globally for Pfizer. If I were in that role today, that would be the main thing I would have them focus on because it mirrors what the business is doing. In that pharmaceutical business, you're trying to research and identify targets and proof of concepts, move that into development, 3 stages of development. It works just like human-centered design. So why not teach everyone in the business what we do to develop successful products for end users? And then you want to establish platform. We gave an example of this with Mark Stickdorn, and something that supports journey management operations and governance. And as I said earlier, start small, experiment with it, find what works, get some quick wins, and then build more sponsors as you go. That's the most pragmatic approach that we've seen. All right. And most of all, don't forget, you want to build organizational empathy for your users. You want everyone in your organization to be able to describe the pain points, the moments that matter, the stories of the people that they're designing for. All right. So this brings us to how we started in HXWise, and maybe one of the reasons why I like to do these conferences and see what other people are doing is that we like to find people to help coach other organizations. So a little story here, a little background story. When I first started researching and writing about this 8 years ago, I was interviewing companies like GE and ABN AMRO and IBM and a telecom company in Asia. So companies of all different locations and sizes and shapes. And these were early pioneers in employee experience at the time. And I asked them, as they shared their stories for our case studies, what can I do for you? And they said, can you introduce us to some other people that are doing this work? We want to learn from some others who have experience, not just with this, that know the skills, but have the inside organizational know-how. So that became the foundation of what we're doing. So HXWise is really a platform to access and pull and draw upon people that have the skill set in these areas of human-centered design, in qualitative and quantitative research methods, field research, and knowledge in how to prototype, test, and implement. So really the nuts and bolts, the core of human-centered design. And I would multiply that by, if we can find coaches, those of you who have this experience, but know how to implement inside an organization. You can go out and find a design company, any design company, there are hundreds of them, maybe thousands, that understand this here in the skill areas. But if they've never worked inside an organization and they don't know what politics are like, they don't know what resistance is like, and outright rebellion, as a former lead of transformation, then they can't be successful in getting these things into the organization. And that's what we look for in our coaches. And whether or not you're formally coaching with us in a project or a boot camp, I have people all the time say, can you introduce me to 2 or 3 people who have done this? And that's why, one of the reasons why we host these events is to get to know people who have that combination, that rare combination of these things that can help create a movement and spread this knowledge across to other organizations. This, we believe, leads to the best building of skills and champions across all these teams. We want to create great human experiences for colleagues and customers. And we believe that the combination of these things will lead us to have business impact. So I want to, if you have any questions, please write them in the chat. I'm kind of full screen right here. I want to get to questions that we have so far, but I do want to share some use cases before I open up for questions here. Yeah, it looks like we're moving pretty fast. So here are some quick examples of some early case studies, actually case studies we've done over the last 8 years. So let me just highlight a few of these. And this also kind of shows the variety of companies, business and use cases, et cetera, that people find themselves in. So Envision is one of the top app developers. If you look at your favorite apps on your phone or mobile device, it was probably designed by Envision. They make more apps for F100 companies, Fortune 100 companies than anyone else. And a person there, she's now at another organization, Marie Kretlow, she's been one of our coaches. She mapped out the entire experience for a remote workforce. Now, this was before the pandemic. So they had 5,000 employees, and they'd grown from 500 to 5,000 in just a few years. She created, out of mapping these experiences and personas and doing all the field research, et cetera, she created, especially was critical for them, the onboarding experience. Because if you think about how complicated and difficult it is when you're meeting your team or people that are your stakeholders and you can't spend time with them in person. So not having that ability, she was able to understand and empathize with those needs and create an entirely new onboarding experience for these people. Walmart, it was one that inspired me for this idea that I mentioned earlier about finding the people that have the skills and then moving them to the right places in the organization. So here's an organization of over 1 million employees, the largest company in the world. They had, within a few months, they built a team of 200 people. May not seem like a lot for 1 million population, but they pulled together from all the different parts of the business all of their UX, UI, and service design people, analytics people who had done field research, qual and quant data insights, and created this team of 200. And they completely changed the employee experience. So they looked at the end-to-end employee experience with this group of 200. I love the example of BP. So BP was looking at their headquarters and how to redesign that and how to put in more sustainable materials and office furniture. We'll get into that maybe a bit with Steelcase later today. But they spent time over 90 days observing, interviewing 300 employees on how they use their workspace. So looking at their individual workstations, when they went into a meeting room, how many people went in? What was the reason for the meeting? What types of people were there? What roles? How did they use the tech or the physical things that were in that meeting space? All sorts of things. Out of that, they came up with 16 different colleague journeys that mattered to them. The thing that I loved about it, and this is an important thing to note for those of you who are in HR, most of them had nothing to do with HR. We often think that HR is the employee journey. People don't join or leave a company because of HR. Hate to break it to you, but they came up with a complete redesign of their headquarters workspace near London, and they did it with recycled materials. They also had some robots and AI coaching going on in there, and they tested different workspaces. So they set up some test spaces, let people come in, use it, see how it worked, make changes, put them back. So they really did some interesting human-centered design work. We worked with PepsiCo and trying to understand the rewards drivers, and we interviewed and did co-creation with I would say probably about 60 people across Europe. This was in 2020, early 2020, and helped them create 5 key personas to understand the motives, preferences, and pain points behind rewards personas. Coach is another one. Coach is the largest public company in Turkey, 100,000 employees, very conglomerate. I mean, everything from automotive to universities to healthcare. And we did a boot camp with them and trained several hundred of their employees just before the pandemic. I mean, I literally came home from Istanbul on March 12th when the US closed. And after that, they used all of this to engage 35,000 employees about their home-based work experiences. So they quickly shifted all of this knowledge into how do we best support our people during the pandemic. They had 2,000 people share journals with them. And they developed 12 different personas for the remote working experience, mostly around the situation at home. Who's living with me? What are the support needs that these people have that I'm supporting, and how does that impact my work, et cetera? And then their teams came up with 1,000 ideas to address needs, and they had soaring engagement scores, really high productivity during this period. It was a really great story. I actually have that's a research case online on our website. So kind of as a background for all this, let's talk about a framework. And this is, I'm a very open source guy. So our framework, our playbook and toolkit here will resemble the double diamond approach that you've most likely seen. We've just added an earlier diamond here because we want to spend more time on understanding the context. So it starts on the left here with exploring who are we? Who are we in this audience? How do people experience work? And what makes the different personas in this unique? So we want to understand, starting with our listening strategy and our gathering our data. You can see some of these things here we get in each stage. I'm going to go into the details in the next slides, but you can see the activities that we're engaged in. It's iterative. This roughly coincides with empathize, define, ideate, and prototype and test, so that you've seen in some other models. Let me go into it in more detail here. So in the first stage, these are some of the methods and tools. These are examples of methods and tools that we use. So we start with an initial problem statement. We pull together a product team out of the people who touch a particular journey. We create a stakeholder map and a stakeholder strategy. We start by looking at existing data. And this is kind of a data loop. You start with with what you have, you understand from that, where do we want to dig deeper? And you create a research strategy out of that. We like to use qualitative open text questions to start and help use those to help us define which quantitative questions we want to ask. And then we go from there. And then as we validate those, then we can kind of keep this cycle going of qualitative to quantitative, et cetera. But we like to emphasize that we want multiple data points. So we like to employ, and we teach this in our boot camps. You want to do in your field research, do observation with questioning. You want to do semi-structured interviews. You want to do mapping and co-creation. So several methods. In triangulation means you have three methods, at least three different people or types of people who are doing the research to reduce bias. And you want to have at least three different types of people in your target audience so that you make sure that you're overcoming bias and getting too deep into one type of feedback. So that's the idea behind triangulation. And in all of this, we set up a research wall to be able to synthesize all this. And then we move into creating empathy maps, persona maps, and personas are not based on a demographic. They're based on use patterns, preferences, how they use our products, pain points, et cetera. In the second stage, we want to map the current experience of these personas and look at their actions, their pains and gains, what are the problems they're trying to solve in each step, et cetera. And then as we identify these, we get users to rate the touch points. We'd like to look at each interaction for two numbers. Rate on a scale of 5, your satisfaction and how important that step was for you. That gives us a fraction, 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5, 1 out of 4, which gives us a relative idea of where they're putting their priority in the journey. And then after that, we map our front and backstage actions to try and see how that supports it. So in a quick little animation, how this looks in a service blueprint, we start with getting people to identify the steps or the actions that they took along the journey, that we use that to synthesize the stages, describe the stages. Along with each step, we want to understand the goals or the problems they're trying to solve. What are their pains and gains? And give those ratings on a scale of 5, satisfaction versus importance. And we get them to vote on particular interactions that are moments that matter with these red dots. Then as we do our front and backstage, mapping all of the systems, processes, what a manager does, what IT does, what our systems and processes, all of these different players in the front and backstage, we want to see how well we are supporting or not supporting those priorities that our end users identified for us. So as I was listening to Brigitte talk yesterday, I was thinking about this as a visualization to all of this, because this is a great way to show stakeholders and also people in our product teams, for them to see where should we be spending our time in the context of what people are describing for us, the experience that they're having. That helps us to get to that empathy that we talked about. Okay. So in the third stage, we're doing, first of all, ideation exercises. So sometimes we play a hackathon where we involve end users in designing the experience. I loved the story yesterday of Karen Reeves and how they got their customers in the UAE to not only map the experience, but participate and contribute in the ideation of the new solutions, the new products for designing IKEA stores in the UAE. So we go through and we have different ideation methods we employ. Mark talked about having a matrix where on one graph you have impact, another graph you have feasibility, and maybe the size of that bubble is the reach or the cost or whatever. You can set your parameters for how you want on these matrices. But it helps us to make decisions about where we focus when we do our prototyping and how we want to test it. So once we have our prototype, as we do our prototyping of this, we want to agree our design methodologies. We like to use storyboarding as a way to put back all of the people that were in the front and back stage and what's their role in the delivery of this. So how do we set it up? It's like staging with props, etc. And then we do user testing and share the updated metrics that we have, the decision matrix that I was referring to with our stakeholders. We pitch this to our end users. And this is a picture in a workshop of someone sharing a design of a new digital interface for mobile for people who are changing roles within L'Oreal in North Asia. So he's sharing this with people that had previously shared their experiences. These are the end users, and he's letting them test it out. And this is where you get your new MVP. So I'm sure all of these steps sound really familiar to those of you who practice human-centered design. And I imagine some of you even have some better ideas, which I would love to hear. But this is kind of the basic idea behind the HX playbook. Let me talk about a few places where we've implemented this and some things that we've learned along the way. So AstraZeneca during the pandemic came to us and said, we want to understand the parental leave experience. And we want to understand the experience for people that are first-time mothers. People are, this is not their first, as we say in English, they're not their first rodeo. People who are going through an adoption, and people who are, the non-birth parents, and those who are managers of these people. So we want to understand the experience of all these different groups. What we started with was we did a 2.5-day HX Champions boot camp where we went through the playbook that I just described for you. We taught them using an actual focus journey and real people how to model all of this, how to apply it in a real life situation. So, and this was kind of in that champions group, we had stakeholders, we had all the content providers. They were at a point where they were considering going out to third-party providers of benefits for people going on parental leave. So we had some of those people in the meeting, different providers even. So like I said, stakeholders, content providers, really everybody who touched that journey. And we did this first as a way to build, as I was referring to earlier, that capability and mindset in that wider audience who would later need to support all this or be working with it in some way. So we did that first to start creating that movement and that basic understanding of how it all worked and create people who could be champions for this. Then after that, we did, so here's some of the things that we did. So develop champions. We also wanted, with a smaller core group, teach the teachers, people who would later on coach others within the organization on how to do this. So it's their first application of these human-centered design tools with a real use case. And then after that, we took the people who were in the product teams for these 5 journeys, and we took them over a 12-week period and did a little longer project to really go in depth, end to end within those journeys, and look at how this is being done. So we coached the journey team on how to research an entire journey. We taught them how to do triangulation. They came up with personas and preferences and patterns. In the middle stage, we coached them as they mapped the end-to-end journey in that way that I prescribed with that I described with the service blueprint. And we also, in the final stage, came up with some actual solutions, which we tested with end users. So these are some of the 2 of the 5 personas that we came up with. And we gave them names. They were clinical research manager or pharmacovigilance scientists. We had how they used parental leave in their business. And I would say when we did the mapping, this was one of the most interesting exercises. I'll give you an example of something there that I think really had helped them to develop empathy for these people. In the people who had in the audience who were sharing their experiences about adoption leave, one couple shared how they had waited 7 years to adopt a child. You never know when you're adopting when that moment will come. It's not like a pregnancy when you have a specific time when that baby's going to come and you know what to expect. This is so fraught with emotion and anxiety and expectation. One of the couples, the birth mother, a birth mother they were working with, took her life. So they were involved in some very serious and deep situations with people that they were waiting for. And one couple shared how when they were finally notified that their baby had arrived in New Orleans during the pandemic, they went to New Orleans in January and they both caught COVID. So their bonding period of the first 30 days with this new child of theirs was spent in a crummy rented Airbnb, both of them sick with COVID. Now, the people who are listening to this story, this is what I want to get to. The people who are listening to this story were in tears by the time they got through with this. It's even hard for me to think about it because it was such an emotional experience. But going back to what I said earlier, now I know how it feels for these people. The people who are in this product team shared with me later, they had no idea what their colleagues had gone through during the pandemic. At the same time, they're being expected to deliver on their business goals or support the work activity. And it gave the organization tremendous insight into what their colleagues were doing. And it felt for them much more appreciated that these people could be listened to by the organization. So, and I just, by the circles here, I'm just noting that they took these moments that matter, these most emotional, poignant moments, and made sure that they put those into the ideation and prototyping. So one of the outputs that they came up with for the first time mothers was a concierge, somebody at the moment when they first wanted to let the organization know that they were going on leave. They set up a personal concierge with them who would customize and walk them through, kind of hold their hands through this whole process of leave. So they took all of the different parts of the journey. We scripted out the call center, and participants from AstraZeneca modeled this. They rehearsed it and played it back for people who had gone on leave recently and got live feedback from that. So it was a really great experience to see this come to fruition and how that worked for them. On a less emotional level, we worked with Earthicon and helped them redesign their HR services. So just to kind of remind you again, we took 5 different journeys. So from across the employee journeys from joining to leaving, and we mapped a service blueprint. So going through the actions, the stages, goals and problems to solve, pains and gains, what's the satisfaction versus important for each step along the way that they described for us, what are their moments that matter, and then how well did the front and back stage support those. So we did the same type of exercise, same type of steps in setting up a service blueprint for each one of these 5 journeys. And they came up with a redesign of all of these. And they actually spent the next 6 months doing the redesign, taking all the insights from this. They told us in subsequent meetings that and coaching sessions that this helped them to prioritize their budget and resources. That was one of the biggest helps for them. It actually helped them save a certain amount of money, which I'm not at liberty to share, but it was a significant amount of money in their budget for the next year. But they felt confident that they were focusing on the right things. So there goes back to your heart of your business case story to your business leaders. you can have confidence you're making the right decisions and focusing your resources in the right places. Along the way, they also established some accountability. They trained people who are supporting these 5 journeys. It changed their HRIT systems and the functionality there. It also helped them know what to go to their third-party providers. Those of you any of you who've dealt with third-party providers, they often dictate to us what they'll do, and it's the tail wagging the dog. This is our ability to be able to say to them, these are the specific services and how we want it to function, how we want it to be staged and delivered. And they also trained a core team of champions in human-centered design for Oerlikon. So across these 5 journeys. All right, last one. And I know we might have a couple of L'Oreal people on the call here. So if I miss something or you want to add something, please pipe up. This started with doing some champions boot camps. We called it a People Experience Ambassadors boot camp for L'Oreal. And we did this in the last year across USA, France, North Asia, looking at 5 different countries there. And then we did a specific program in Japan. We're about to do Hong Kong, Korea, and Taiwan in the coming year for them. So again, using this playbook, we did this boot camp 2.5 days in these different regions, and they learned how to apply these tools and methods to a real live focused journey with real life colleagues, and how to use all these tools. So here's a group in France that includes all of the champions. So these are content providers, some stakeholders, digital people, other people in the product teams, et cetera, who learned how to use these tools. Each one of these regions, each one of these countries did a different focus journey too. I'll come to that in a second. So they learned how to, in a next stage, how to apply these new skills in a project. So remember with AstraZeneca, we talked about first doing it at boot camp with the champions and then applying it more deeply with the product teams. So we've done that now in New York City with meetings and rituals with the USA team. And we're doing some onboarding work with some other part and shared services with some other parts of the organization. And we record all of the things that are on paper Post-its onto a Smaply map so that they have a platform that they can access for journey map operations. They can attach their data insights and they can pull data out of there in this decision matrix to look at feasibility versus impact, and then the potential or cost is the size of the bubbles here. So this gives them a platform that they can use for governance and managing these on an ongoing basis. So outcomes, they had this map this journey map end to end that they had that they've been working with and can still continue to work with. The playbook became the framework for how they apply these tools and methods for these journeys. And now they've been able to successfully map and redesign some significant portions of their colleague journeys, and they have people experience champions in all the regions. So we've seen them create this movement, and they're beginning to learn how to do journey map operations. So let me stop there. I realize I've probably run out of most of my time. I hope that I haven't exhausted anyone. Any questions? You can either write in the text or open up your mic and speak. One thing I hope by sharing this is to inspire you with a template and some different examples, because there are all different ways to apply this, but these are some things we've seen work, I hope inspire others of you. Thank you, Maura. Okay, so we're going to take a short break. And one of the things let me go back to the original question, maybe get a thumbs up or down. How does this help you if you're going to your business leaders or your clients and saying, these are some what are some points that you pulled out of this as far as being able to say, this is my business case. This is the business reason why you should do this. What are some thoughts you have on that? That change is possible. I love that. Yeah.
And
Personalization
I'm
is a big,
noticing some patterns of inspiration and optimism in terms of change. And there's a note here about the patterns seeming similar. In your experience, are the solutions similar, or do you see a lot of diversity, for example, in how an organization decides to address a moment that matters in onboarding or some other process?
yeah, that's a great question. And we've done a lot of onboarding. It's probably been the most frequent, although we've done all kinds. But the fun thing is, and this is a little bit hair-raising for some of us, you don't know what you're going to get out of it. It really is a creative process. And you don't know because you don't know what people are going to tell you. One of the moments that I loved with L'Oreal in the USA is that we started with that existing data and we asked them to talk about it in their groups. What were some of the key messages? What were they hearing? And as I went around and listened to the tables, I heard a lot of assumptions. There's the data, and it was a lot of quant data. So quant data doesn't tell you anything. They're saying this because this. They're saying this because this is happening. And I've done that myself. By the end of the workshop, at the end of the boot camp, after they'd listened to people, their perspective was completely different. And they were talking about these things, and they even expressed that they said they felt like they now had the voice of the end user instead of their own voice. And I think that's the biggest changer here is that often we hear, Julie, people will say, I thought the problem was X and it turned out to be Y. And that's great. The other thing that I love
Yeah.
about these too is and those of you who've done these co-creative workshops, we spend about we spend a minimal amount of time setting up the exercises and explaining, and 90% of the time doing. So most of the learning comes from them trying stuff out and seeing where they get to with it, and then talking to the rest of the group and sharing those insights. So the best learning comes from the participants and the insights they're getting, not from us.
Yeah, that's something I can confirm. Yeah, if you there's a saying, follow the process. Very often you start and then you think, gosh, we are collecting a lot of insights and data and where should this go? And then at a certain point there's a switch where great outcomes then all of a sudden appear and this is where I always say follow the process and then there will be good outcomes. And
Yes.
the best is, like you said, if we have some unexpected insights which you didn't expect at the beginning, and then which are becoming a game changer, then this is just fascinating. Yeah, if we
Yeah,
have this.
it really is, Albrecht. It
Mm.
really is. I think it required, for me, as somebody who's facilitated and done different kinds of things over years, it's a completely different facilitation style also, right?
Mhm.
Because you go into it with a lot of humility. You can set up the exercise, you can determine the things you do, but you can't determine the outcome. And
Yes. Yeah.
that's scary for a lot of us. So it's unlearning a lot of things that we thought were important to us as facilitators. I think that's
Mm.
all.
Mm. Yeah.